In today's video, I'm going to be ranking the top 10 centers of all time. This is the last video of a 5-part series where I've uploaded daily my top 10 of each position from all time. So the last 4 days I've uploaded the point guard, shooting guard, small forwards, and power forwards videos, and all of those will be linked down below in the description, and make sure to go check them out if you haven't already. So to anyone watching this on the date of the upload, Happy New Year to you all. I'm uploading this on January 1st, so it's my first video of 2021, and I'm pretty excited to finish off the year strong of 2020 and start off this one strong with this video. So in terms of the centers, this is a very interesting list because, as most of us know, the center position absolutely dominated the NBA for a long time, many decades, all the way from the 1960s up until about the 1990s. And on this list, we have tons of all-time great players, and I'd say that this top 10 list is the best out of all of them that I've done so far, out of all of the other positions. We know that the center position isn't as dominant right now because there's a lot more three-point shooting in today's games, but all-time centers is a very fun list to make, so let's get right into it. Before we start, make sure you guys subscribe to the channel if you haven't already so you don't miss out on any new videos. The series is over, but I'm definitely not done with making videos. I've still got the redraft series and many other fun videos on the way, so make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. So as always, if you watch the other videos in this series, we know that you always start off with some honorable mentions. And for the centers, we have 5. Just like the small forwards, there's a lot of honorable mentions for this one. So the first one goes out to Robert Parrish, who would definitely be making the list if he had a little bit more of a dominant offensive game, but he just misses out. Another one is Bob McAdoo. Really, for him, consistency throughout his career is what kept him off the list. He was a winner of an MVP award, but I had to just leave him off. Another is Willis Reed, another very good overall complete player that doesn't quite have the accolades or the dominance to be on the list, but he definitely gets an honorable mention. Another is Bill Walton, another winner of an MVP here who would probably come in at 11 on the list if I were to expand it, but again, he just misses out. And then the last one is probably the most interesting of all of the honorable mentions, and it goes to Nikola Jokic. This is probably the only modern day center that you're going to see on this list, and I think Jokic has a good chance to be on the list by the time his career ends, but he hasn't done enough throughout his career yet, and he got his career off to a slow start, and he's one of the best second round picks that we've ever seen, and he'll probably be on the list by the end of his career, but for now he gets an honorable mention. Kicking off the list now, at number 10, I've got Wes Unseld. Wes Unseld recently passed away, so of course, rest in peace to him. And really, he's making the list here because throughout his career, he won an MVP in the 1969 season and led his team to a championship, the Washington Bullets, in 1978, and won the Finals MVP. So his MVP and Finals MVP really is what gets him on the list. He was never really that good of an offensive dominant scorer, only averaging 10 points for his career, but he's one of the best rebounders and dominant inside players that we've ever seen. He averaged 14 rebounds for his career, was a very good rebounder and defender, and like I mentioned, was dominant enough to win an MVP and lead his team to a championship. So for these reasons, he definitely makes the list. At 9, I have George Mikan. I really don't know that much about George Mikan because he played all the way back in the 1950s, but he was so dominant and was really one of the first superstars that we've ever seen in the league, and ESPN has him ranked in their top 35 on their all-time list. So basically because of that, he definitely has to make the list, and like I mentioned, he was just a very good dominant overall player that, despite playing all the way back in the 50s, still led the league in scoring and was one of, if not the first superstar that we've ever seen in the game, and he has to rank here at 9. At number 8 on the list, I've got Patrick Ewing. The next 3 centers on this list were very hard to rank, but ultimately Ewing's coming in here at 8, and he's a guy that a lot of people have in their top 30 of all time. Personally, I don't. He's just left off my list, but he gets an honorable mention for that. And in his prime, he was an incredibly dominant player who was a very good inside scorer, and one year even averaged close to 29 points per game, and was really your typical traditional center who would dominate inside the paint, grab tons of rebounds, and was a great shot blocker. His career stats end up looking like 21 points per game and 10 rebounds per game, and really what's holding him just a little bit below the guys that I put at 7 and 6 was the fact that he never won an MVP or a championship. But like I mentioned, he was still an incredibly dominant player who made the All-Star game many times, was in the MVP race many times, and for these reasons he ranks here at 8. At number 7 on the list, I've got David Robinson. Now, Bleacher Report has David Robinson all the way at 12 on their list, which I think is very high for him. I think we can all agree that's a little bit too high for David Robinson. For me, he's just outside of my top 20 and is really a very similar player to Patrick Ewing. They have very similar career stats and played a very similar play style, bodying people in the paint and really being dominant traditional centers. The only difference for them in the comparison is that throughout their careers, Patrick Ewing never won an MVP. Like I said, he came close, but David Robinson did. In 1995, he won the NBA MVP, and he also helped contribute to a championship with the Spurs in 1999. He also led the league in scoring once, led the league in rebounds once, and led the league in blocks once, having nearly 5 blocks per game. He was an incredibly dominant player as a center, and ranks just slightly over Patrick Ewing because of the reasons I've listed, like for example, winning an MVP. At number 6 on the list, I've got Moses Malone. He is one of the most underrated players in the league in my opinion all time, and should definitely be considered here at 6. For the top 5, we can't put him there because most of those players are considered top 10 players of all time, but for me, Moses Malone definitely has to be here at 6. He was so dominant at times throughout his career and was a 3-time MVP to David Robinson's 1 and Patrick Ewing's 0. So because of that reason, he definitely has to be here at 6, and he also led his team to a championship in 1983 with the Sixers and won the Finals MVP because of that. So his championship, his 3 MVPs really boost him up on this list, and for me, make him a top 20 player of all time. For his overall game, he was an incredible inside scorer, an incredibly dominant rebounder, much better than David Robinson and Ewing, leading the league in rebounds 6 times throughout his career, and he made the all-defensive team twice throughout his career as well, being a very good defender at times, and really just an overall dominant player who, like I mentioned, his 3 MVPs really get him high up on this list. At number 5 on the list, I've got Bill Russell. Bill Russell is a very hard and interesting player to rank because of when he played and certain things in his game that more people value more than others. But for me, he ranks here at 5, and we know what he was about throughout his career. One of, if not the best rebounders we've ever seen, averaging 22 rebounds for his career. And they didn't keep track of a lot of defensive stats back then, things like steals and blocks, but we can probably agree that he's the greatest defender of all time. And on top of all this, we know that the biggest career-defining moment for Bill Russell is the fact that he won 11 championships over his career. So all of these reasons are why he's definitely a top 10 player of all time and a top 5 center easily. But we have to remember that his championships came when there was only 8 teams in the league, and he really didn't have that much of an offensive game either, only putting up 15 points for his career, and these are the reasons why I don't have him ranked a little bit higher like other people. The player he's always compared to is Wilt Chamberlain, and while most people give it to Wilt Chamberlain just like I do, some people give it to Bill Russell because of his rings. And what I have to say to that is, first of all, you have to remember that Bill Russell did have the much better team than Wilt Chamberlain in those days, and his offensive game really doesn't compare to Wilt's at all. They were both great rebounders and defenders, Bill a little bit better, but because of the offensive dominance, Wilt Chamberlain is a little bit better in my opinion. So for all of these reasons and the fact that Bill Russell's rings are just a little bit overrated, but he still is probably the greatest defender of all time, he ranks here at 5 for me on the centers list. At number 4 on the list, I have Hakeem Olajuwon. We know what Hakeem's about. He's the guy that has won an MVP in his career, won 2 Defensive Player of the Years, and is probably a top 3 defender of all time, right up there with Bill Russell, and also led a team to a championship 2 years back-to-back in 1994 and 95, and winning the Finals MVPs in those years. He ranks slightly over Bill Russell for me because of his offensive game and how versatile he was on that end of the floor, and he was also, like I mentioned, one of the greatest defenders we've ever seen, and really I think 4 is the perfect spot for Hakeem on this list, because of, first of all the reasons I've mentioned, he definitely has to be this high, and the reason he doesn't rank above the guys that I've put in the top 3 is just because his scoring ability wasn't quite as dominant as them. But because of all these reasons, he's ranking here at 4. At number 3 on the list, I've got Shaq. Prime Shaq was probably one of the most dominant players we've ever seen, and if he was in the paint against you, you weren't stopping him. He's just too big and too dominant inside the post. And in 2000, he won the MVP in that year, and then throughout his career won 4 championships, 3 of which came with a three-peat from 2000 to 2002 with young Kobe Bryant, and he won all 3 of those finals MVPs. So he goes down as a 1-time MVP, a 3-time finals MVP, a 4-time NBA champion, and the most dominant player we've ever seen inside the paint. And for these reasons, he's easily a top 3 center of all time, and probably ranks a little bit higher on some other people's lists. You'll see who I have at 2 and 1, but because of Shaq's inside dominance and his legacy, he's ranking here at 3. At number 2, I have Wilt Chamberlain. Wilt Chamberlain is one of the hardest players ever to rank on any sort of all-time list. In terms of centers, he could rank as high as 1, and he could rank as low as 6 or 7. We really don't know because he played in the 1960s and really didn't play against that good of competition, but is still probably the most dominant player we've ever seen in his prime. We all know that there was that one season where he literally averaged 50 points, and throughout his career, he was just that. He was an incredibly dominant scorer, an even more dominant rebounder, going down as probably the best rebounder ever, leading the all-time list in rebounds with around 23,000, and then as we know, being an incredible defender. And when he started to get out of his prime, he took on the role of passing and really averaged a lot of assists. So overall throughout his career, he's probably the most dominant player we've ever seen. And the main question to ask is, do we think he would do this in a more modern day NBA with more competition? And my answer to that question is yes, and actually very close to what he did in those days. So that's why I have him ranking here, and close to my top 5 of all time as well. And finally, ending off the list and the series with my number 1 center of all time, and it's Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I think most people can agree that Kareem's the greatest center of all time, and I actually think he's the 3rd best player of all time behind Michael Jordan and LeBron James, and I'm surprised he doesn't get more consideration for the GOAT. It's probably because he was never a great playmaker like MJ and LeBron, and played in the 70s, but when we look back at Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's career, he goes down as a 6-time MVP, a 6-time NBA champion, the leading all-time scorer with 38,000 points, and a member of the all-defensive team as well many times, an incredibly dominant overall scorer, dominant defender, and like I mentioned, won 6 MVPs and 6 championships, and for me is without a doubt the greatest center of all time. So there you have it. That is the end of my top 10 centers video and the end of this series. As I mentioned, make sure to check out the other videos if you haven't already. They'll be linked down below in the description. I've worked very hard on this series, so if you want, feel free to share any of these videos with any of your friends. And as always, definitely make sure to leave your list in the comments below and leave what you agree with and disagree with. Thank you to all of you who have watched this series and my channel over the last few days. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Again, Happy New Year to you all. I hope you guys have a great 2021. I will see you guys next video.